Growing up, Saturdays were magic. Dad would burst into our rooms before sunrise, whisper shouting, "Adventure Day." We'd groan, grumble, and then spring out of bed. Adventure days were sacred. Mom packed snacks and Dad loaded flashlights, gloves, and water bottles into backpacks. Then we'd pile into our rattling old blue van, the mystery machine as Mom called it, Scooby-Doo style, and drive for hours. We didn't go to theme parks or hiking trails. Our destinations were old hospitals, abandoned hotels, derelict factories, and forgotten construction sites. Dad called them forgotten places. He'd explain with reverence how these buildings once buzzed with life, but now sat in silence, waiting for curious explorers like us. There were rules. Never post photos online, always whisper inside, use the code word banana if we saw anyone, and never ever tell anyone where we went. Oh, and we could each take one souvenir, but only if it was broken or clearly left behind. Finn, my little brother, collected them like precious artifacts, cracked tiles, rusted signage, broken clocks. He displayed them proudly in shadow boxes Mom helped him arrange. I thought this was normal family bonding. I bragged about it in elementary school until one teacher gave me a look I didn't understand at the time. It wasn't until I was 14, chatting with my friend Maria and her police officer dad, that I realized the truth. I described our weekend plans in vague terms, but his expression shifted. He asked if we had permission to enter those places. I blinked. "They're abandoned," he explained, gently but firmly, that we were trespassing, breaking and entering, possibly even stealing. I laughed it off at first, convinced he was being overly cautious, but that conversation planted a seed I couldn't ignore. I asked my mom about it that night. She brushed it off so quickly it felt rehearsed. The adventure days slowed down. I assumed they realized I was on to them. But then, about a year later, Dad proposed one last trip. "Special adventure night," he said, grinning like a kid. He'd found a mansion, a real gem, and promised it was totally abandoned. Finn was ecstatic. I was skeptical, but didn't want to miss out. The place was strange, half-renovated, with tools and furniture left behind. Finn found a wooden box hidden behind books in the library, filled with jewelry. Real jewelry. Dad's eyes lit up. He told Finn to stash it. I protested. "That's not abandoned junk. That's someone's treasure." Dad snapped at me. Then we heard a car. A security guard shouted at us to stop. I was sure we were about to be shot. Turned out he'd just slammed his flashlight for attention, but the panic was real. We were marched out, backpack searched. Finn sobbed as he handed over the jewelry box. Police were called. We were separated, questioned. I told them everything, every building, every souvenir, every whispered adventure. I watched my parents, my suburban, church-going, safe parents, be treated like criminals. And they were. Aunt Patricia picked us up from the station. She was furious and bewildered. "What the hell is going on?" she kept asking. We didn't have answers. Mom tried to explain later that most of the places really had been abandoned, that Dad had made a terrible mistake this time. I exploded. "They were all illegal," I screamed. "You knew." Dad was held. Mom was released. The jewelry Finn found was worth over $50,000. The house belonged to a wealthy family who'd been renovating it. The police weren't buying the abandoned excuse. Back home, Mom confessed, Dad had started urban exploring before they met, just for fun. But after losing his job, he began taking small things. No one missed them, he claimed. Over time, the thrill and the money kept him going. Our vacations, my dance classes, Finn's school, they'd all been funded by what Dad stole. The police raided our house. Neighbors watched. Officers cataloged our belongings. Turns out a shocking amount of what we owned was stolen. Finn had a full-blown breakdown when they took his collections. He thought they were harmless junk. They weren't. Patricia confronted Mom. "How could you let this happen?" Mom broke down, finally admitting she'd known, but hadn't wanted to see. She called it denial. I called it betrayal. At school, word spread fast. I was the burglar's daughter. A girl named Teresa started calling me Sticky Fingers. When she mocked a bracelet Dad had given me, asking if I stole it, I snapped. We fought. I got suspended. That weekend, we moved into a tiny apartment across town. Finn and I shared a room. Mom slept on the pull-out couch. Everything smelled like mildew and regret. I heard her crying every night. Then CPS came. They asked if we felt safe, if Mom had encouraged the theft. I didn't know what to say. I defended her, but I wasn't sure anymore. That night, Mom collapsed among the boxes and sobbed that they might take us away. I sat beside her, finally seeing her, not as a mom, but as a broken woman trying to hold together the pieces of a shattered life. We couldn't stay in the house anymore. Too much of it was evidence. The police had bagged and tagged everything from furniture to decor. Even toys from our childhood were under scrutiny. We moved into that depressing apartment with barely enough to furnish the basics. Aunt Patricia helped, but she and Mom were barely speaking after their backyard confrontation. The tension was thick and bitter. At the new school, I kept my head down. No one knew me as the burglar's daughter there. Yet, that anonymity was a thin comfort. Finn, on the other hand, was spiraling. One night, I caught him going through Mom's jewelry box. He was clutching a small gold locket. When I confronted him, he broke down, sobbing that he just wanted things to feel. It wasn't just about stolen goods. Dad had rewired our brains. Adventure days had been our curriculum in crime, disguised as family bonding. I helped Finn return what he'd taken. We made a pact. If he ever felt the urge again, he'd come to me first. We visited Dad in jail. I didn't want to, but Mom begged. Seeing him in that jumpsuit was surreal. He looked older, thinner, smaller. I tried to stay quiet, but the resentment boiled over. "Why did you do it?" I snapped. His response was nauseating. "I wanted you to have everything I didn't." He genuinely believed that justified it. The judge didn't see it that way. At his sentencing, they listed every charge: burglary, theft, endangerment, contributing to delinquency of a minor. When the victims of the mansion break-ins stood up, it was gut-wrenching. They talked about irreplaceable heirlooms, how they couldn't sleep, how their sanctuary had been violated. That was the day I stopped seeing our adventures as romantic or special. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Dad. He wanted to meet for coffee. We met at a quiet cafe near campus. He brought a notebook. Inside, he'd listed every place he remembered breaking into, everything he'd taken. He said he'd already given a copy to his parole officer. This one was for me. "I'm done hiding," he said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to be honest." It was overwhelming. Some of the items had notes: family heirloom, owner deceased, children devastated. He'd researched the people he'd stolen from. Part of me was relieved he was taking responsibility. The other part was horrified. I asked if he still missed it, the adrenaline, the theft. He said yes, sometimes, that it was like an addiction. That scared me more than anything. Back at Mom's house, we had another dinner. Dad had found a job at a warehouse. The conversation turned to an old building downtown. Dad started describing its architecture, voice tinged with that old excitement. I cut him off. "Did you tell your parole officer about that place?" Silence. Mom looked horrified. Finn looked betrayed. Dad looked ashamed. "I was just appreciating it," he said quietly. "I wasn't planning anything, but I saw it in his eyes. That itch. That dinner changed something." Dad had said all the right words, but that look in his eyes made my skin crawl. It was the same look from the mansion night, when he saw that jewelry box. Desire masked his fascination. After the building comment, Finn snapped at me, said I never gave Dad a chance, that he'd done his time, but Dad raised his hand and said, "She's right to be cautious. I haven't earned her trust." Then he turned to Finn. "I need you to understand that what I did was wrong, not just illegal, morally wrong. I hurt people." That was the first time I heard him say it with no qualifiers. No, but I was desperate. No, it was just abandoned junk. Just guilt. A week later, he called me again, wanted to meet at a park. When I got there, he handed me the notebook again, this time with new pages, a plan, steps for rebuilding trust, for resisting temptation, for staying clean. He said he'd enrolled in therapy and was doing weekly group sessions for people with compulsive behavior. I wanted to believe him, but 5 years of thinking about how he trained us to be accessories made that hard. Still, it was something. Then he slipped up. He missed a parole check-in to go look at an old factory. Just looking, he insisted. He didn't go inside, but it was out of county. That alone was a violation. He got off with a warning, but Mom spiraled. I confronted him and he said, "I wasn't doing anything wrong." I asked if just looking was how it started last time. He had no answer. That night, Mom and I had a real conversation. No, she finally admitted she'd noticed the same thing, that he still lingered near old buildings too long, still got that far-off look. We didn't solve anything, but for the first time, we were on the same page. 2 days later, Dad called again, asked to meet. I chose a public park. He brought the notebook again, full of scribbled plans and checklists. He apologized for the missed appointment, for proving me right. Then he said, "I need your help with Finn." He was worried, said Finn was still too easily influenced, that he might see Dad's past as something to emulate instead of avoid. That's when I knew Dad understood what he'd done, not just to the strangers he stole from, but to us. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a strange new rhythm. Dad was working, Mom was less anxious. Finn was prepping for community college. But under the surface, I stayed on alert, always watching for signs that it could all unravel again. One afternoon, I came home to find Finn sitting on our bed, staring at a pen. Not just any pen, a really nice, heavy one I'd never seen before. I asked where he got it. He looked panicked and shoved it in his drawer. I didn't yell. I just sat beside him and said, "You have to tell me the truth." He did. He'd pocketed it from his part-time job. Didn't even think about it. Just saw it. Wanted it. Took it. We sat there for a long time. Eventually, we went back to the store and returned it. No cop, no scene. But Finn was shaken. So was I. He'd been wired to think that taking was normal. That night, I wrote Dad a letter. I told him everything. About the pen. About how I handled it. About how scared I was for Finn. He called the next day crying. Said he was proud of how I handled it. Said he knew the damage he'd caused wasn't done just because he served time. I told him I wasn't looking for pride. I was looking for peace. A few weeks later, he asked if we could all go out, like old times. Just a park, maybe a museum. Nothing shady. I said I'd think about it. I haven't decided yet, because I still see the old building, still hear his voice pointing out entry points, weak locks, valuables, and I hate that part of me wonders what's inside. I'm trying. We all are. But it's not a straight road. It's more like one of those old hallways in the abandoned places Dad used to love. Dark, confusing, full of echoes. You never really know what's around the next corner. But at least now, I'm walking it with my eyes open.